Welcome, everybody. This is Scott at Vegas Horse Pools with my buddy Fats. You can reach him on Twitter. He's at the real fat or real underscore Fats on Twitter. We're going to talk a little bit about the NFL and what would Fats do. Our first game that we're going to talk about is game number 453. That is the Tennessee Titans versus the Cleveland Browns. Fats, what do you see on that game?
We decided we weren't going to talk about that game.
Oh, you scratched that one?
I scratched that one already.
You scratched that one. Okay, well that one's dead. Next game was
it moved somewhere. So the lesson I was going to give kind of the point I was going to make is lost now. The line moved. So,
but did it move because you bet it? Is that what happened?
No, it did not move because I bet it.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go to game number 2. Game number 2 is number 467. The Colts versus the Ravens. You want to take a look at that one for me?
Yes. Well, first of all, before I do that, yesterday I said, well, first of all, if anybody's a big fan of George Carlin, who's a comedian, he used to have a bit called the 7 words you can't say on TV, which were shit, fuck, cocksucker, motherfucker, prick. Shit, cunt, cocksucker, motherfucker, prick. Something like that. Anyway, we're going to refer to those 7 books I gave you yesterday as the 7 bookmakers your bookmaker doesn't want you watching as you're deciding what to bet. And on that list yesterday, I gave you Sports 411, Pinnacle, Circa, Sunday Bets, Shiva, Paradise, and Bet War. Now, Paradise isn't really on your Spank Odds, but there is a book on your Spank Odds called Wager Per Head, and it's under the initials WPH. They don't match the Paradise lines 100% of the time, but most of the time they do have the same line. If you see that line there, there's a good chance it's at Paradise, and if you see it at Paradise, it's a good chance it's there. So usually it'll be there. So if you watch WPH with caution, it'll generally reflect what the line is at Paradise. So
and that's how you. And this is how you add it through bookie management. I've got wager per head highlighted here for you. All you have to do is add it. It'll go into your list. You can go ahead, Fats.
Okay, we're going to discuss 3 games today, and these are all games that are injury related this week. And there's a few differences in the line. There's been some line movement, and I'm just going to discuss different ways to look at them and analyze them and decide what you want to do with them. The first game is 467-68, the Colts and the Ravens. Now, we have Pinnacle as low as 7.5 minus 06, good for 10 dimes. It's 8 at Circa, good for 30,000, and it's 8.5 minus 05, with plus 8.5 minus $1.15 at the 411, good for 25,000. So you have really 7.5 to 8.5. I mean, and you have a full point difference because Pinnacle's plus 7.5 minus $1. Let me see what their juice is on that. They're a 12-cent line there, so they're plus 7.5 minus $1.06, and Chris is plus 8.5 minus $1.15. Or the other way to look at it is they're minus 7.5 minus 06, and Chris is minus 8.5 minus 05. So there's really a full point, and maybe even a little more than a full point between those two. And then out at Bet War, you've got a 9 minus 05. Now, a couple factors you have to weigh into this game when making a decision. First of all, Sunday Bets and Bet Shiva don't even have it up on the board. And that's because there's some injury issues. The quarterback for the Colts, Richardson, who's been playing pretty well as a rookie, he is out with concussion protocol. And the quarterback is going to be Gardner Minshew. Now, Minshew is a serviceable quarterback. So you have this comes down to really how you're handicapping rates Minshew to make a decision on what you might want to do with this game. Obviously, if you think Minshew's live, then the plus 8.5 minus 15 may be the way to go. And if there's other 7.5s popping up, like a WPH is a 7.5. If you possibly get a 7.5 that lets you buy and only pay 10 cents, then you like the Ravens, that's what you should be shopping for on the Ravens side. The other thing to be always cautious about when you've got a game where you see lines anywhere from 7.5 to 9 is a lot of times the bookmakers, because 9, 8.5, they're like considered dead numbers up there. They'll go from 7.5 to 9 to make it more expensive for people to tease the favorite down. So they'll force you to use a 6.5 or 7-point teaser on the Ravens by going up to 9, whereas at 7.5, you could use a 6-point teaser to get down to 1.5. So those are other things to keep in mind. And that's an injury game, so you have to know where you stand handicapping wise on the injury. If you like the dog, you're probably okay taking a taste at the plus 8.5 minus 15 based on what I'm seeing out there. And if you like the favorite, I would hold out, because I think this line is slowly coming down, and you might get in a situation where you can get this game to 7. The next game is Carolina at Seattle, 469 and 470. And this game was 6.5, and it's come down to 5.5. But the quarterback for Carolina, Bryce Young, has been ruled out of the game. But the replacement for him is Andy Dalton, who is a very serviceable quarterback. So with the troubles that Bryce Young has been having, Dalton is kind of an upgrade. At least he's not a downgrade for Carolina. And the money's, since he's been announced out, the game has come from 6.5 down to 5.5. Pinnacle even had, or Circa has a 5, and Chris and Penny are 5.5. So you want to keep that in mind on that game. Don't just say, oh, you got to bet Seattle because the quarterback's out. Because Dalton, and this comes down to how you handicap the game. If Dalton may be the better quarterback, or at least serviceable. So, and the public, or the sharp guys, it appears, are favoring Carolina by having driven it down to 5.5. So those are some things you want to keep in mind on the Seattle-Carolina game. And the other game that we're going to talk about is 479-480, the Rams and the Bengals. Now, this game opened like 6.5, and it came all the way down to practically a pick. It was 1.5, because there was fear that Burrow might be out. And now they're saying he might play, but the game's only come back up to 2.5. It was a little bit of 3 the other day. It's kind of back to 2.5. So if you like the Rams, you already kind of missed the boat taking 6.5 on that game, or 6 or 5 or 5.5. If you like the Bengals, you got to be real careful, because Burrow has not played well, and we really don't know the extent of how much this injury is hampering him. And if he's got the backup quarterback, you certainly don't want the Bengals. So that's another one Right now, the game's pretty much 2.5 and 2.5 minus 15. And you want to keep your eye on Bet War has a 2. So that's one you want to really stay on top of the injury and before you make any kind of a decision. And keep in mind that game has already moved 6 points. So a lot of the value of no Burrow has been taken out of that line. So those are some things you want to consider with those games before you decide what you're going to do with them. Now, the other thing, I mentioned teasers in the Baltimore game, but I'm going to give you something that I did this week, and I think there's a little bit of value to it. Dallas is right now, it's come back down to 12.5, and Kansas City is 12.5. There's some 13s out there, but if you have a place that has 10-point teasers, and you can take and you only have to lay $1.20, and you can take Dallas to 2.5 and Kansas City to 2.5. I would tease them and key them to other teams. Now, if you can play opens, that's even better because you could play Dallas, Kansas City to an open, Dallas, Kansas City to an open, and then you could just fill in the other team later this week or next week with a good 10-point filler. Now, 2 of the games that I think are good uses of your 10 points are the Patriots, because they're minus 2.5 everywhere. It's game 457. But they're minus 2.5 minus $1.20. They're playing the Jets. The 10 points gets you to plus 7.5. It figures to be a defensive game. The Jets haven't been scoring a lot of points. And because it's 2.5 minus 20, it's kind of closer to 3. So by using the 10 points there, you're kind of like picking up 10 cents in value because you're still getting the tease off as if it was 2.5 flat. So that's one game I would use for 10 points. Another game I would use for 10 points on the same logic is 475, 476. The Raiders, they're 2.5 minus as high as 24, $1.20. I even see as high as 28. I see it 3 even. Using the 7 points, getting them plus 7.5 at home against the Steelers. So those are 2 fillers I would use with Dallas, Kansas City, and I don't see any others at the moment that I would use. I would not use the Dolphins from 6.5 to plus 3.5, or Buffalo from 6.5 to plus 3.5. One, because a lot of times when you've got these 6.5s, they tend to drop down to 6, and then you're losing your value there. So I wouldn't use either one of those. I wouldn't use the 2.5 on the Bengal game because that game could still drop based on the injury information. And that's all I really see. So I would take the 2.5. I would use the Raiders and the Patriots as fillers, and I would key Dallas and Kansas City, and maybe key Dallas and Kansas City to a couple opens if you have a place that will let you play opens and lay $1.20 on the 3-team 10-pointers. And that's what Fats would do, and part of what Fats has done.
I want to ask one question, and then we'll wrap
Surely.
this up. Let's take a look at the totals. Did the totals affect any of your decisions on any of these games that you talked about?
No, I didn't. Although you should factor the totals in when doing teasers, because obviously the lower the total, the more value that brings. But that being said, the Jets game, which I mentioned, is an under weather game, is a weather related under game this week, And the Ravens, although we didn't talk about putting them in a teaser, that's another another game that's got some weather issues. So that could be that game. The totals dropped. So that on the weather, the Jets, the Jets weather is the one that would be the most beneficial. The Raiders, they play in a dome, so there's not going to be any weather to help you there. And I don't have any reports on the Bengals game, but again, because of the injury, we wouldn't use that one anyway.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I just thought I would ask that. We've had a couple of things happen while we've been on the recording here. And I don't know if you guys caught it or not, but there was a line alert for an increase in the amount one of the sportsbook was taking. That's one critical function of Spank Odds is to set those up so that when a sportsbook starts taking more money, it notifies you. The other notification we got during this is there was an injury report on a baseball game. I didn't catch what team it was, but that's another really important thing that Spank Odds allows you to do. On the football games, if you just hover over the word info, it will tell you who has been ruled in and out and who the starting quarterbacks are going to be. That injury report is critical to your success on handicapping these if you're going to be using something like a Spank Odds. Fats, I really appreciate all your time today. I appreciate you clarifying the issue with the said 7 deadly sports books. Is there anything else you'd like to say in closing?
Nope, that's it. That's the seven sports books. Your sports book doesn't want to hear that you're watching.
That sounds really good to me. Okay, well, again, my name is Scott. You can reach me at Twitter at Vegas Horse Pools. If you have any questions about anything that we did on Spank Odds, you can reach me at Spank Odds as a DM on Twitter. Of course, you can reach Fats at real_Fats on Twitter also. One last thing, the proxy service, VHP Proxy, need to get your picks in tonight by 7:30 Pacific time. And that'll be it for our show today. And hopefully I can talk Fats into a show tomorrow, unless we're celebrating another big Nebraska win. That's it for today.
Well,
Thank you very much.
I got to tell you, as a 21-point favorite, if you're not celebrating a Nebraska win tomorrow, you better take them out of your vocabulary.
Well, it's the best team in college football right now, so I'm counting on us being celebrating. Thank you very much, everyone.